All right, great. Well, I really appreciate everyone's time. The main purpose of this webinar is really just to kind of introduce you to our app. The recent CoinGeek live conference, we had a slot there, and it was very apparent to me quickly that there wasn't enough time to kind of dive into the details of what we've been doing and really sort of expand upon the concepts, the technical underpinnings, how it functions, and what's to come, what are the features that are coming. So this is really a talk for developers, but I really want to make it also a business focus. I want to think about how this is going to apply to the real world, think about prospective customers, think about use cases, and sort of maybe differentiate between some of the other protocols out there. And I think expand upon why we think we're different and why we think we're valuable in what we're doing here. All right, so as a little tour, a lot of this is going to be repetitious compared to the first demo, but I think it's important to go over because I know the first demo was very short and I spoke very quickly. I'm going to take a bit more time on this. So to start with, on the left-hand side, this is when you see in Slack, you see in Discord, it's basically servers or workspaces. And we were inspired by that approach. We think it's a really important approach for this kind of problem that we're trying to solve here. So what we've done here is this is entities. So this is unique. So most people, when they think of financial services bank accounts, they think of accounts, right? So you've opened an account with a bank, it's on their books, it's rooted in accounting theory. So literally on their books, they'll have an account for you as a customer, and it will be US dollars, for example, and that's the account you have, or Great British pounds, or what have you. In this scenario, in the protocol and in the blockchain world, we are confronted or presented with an opportunity to kind of do things a little bit differently and conceive of things a little bit differently. Now, in real technical terms, it's still really an account. So the issuer, if they've issued if they're a central bank, for example, and they've issued some Great British pounds, it's really like on their books as a liability. And when you have it, it's on your books as an asset. But we think in terms of presenting the information that you have, your assets and your liabilities, it can be done on an entity basis. And you don't need to use the word account. You don't need to break it down in terms of accounts. We think it can be done better and more cleanly, so to speak. So I hope they appreciate that kind of nuance there. When you're in the realm of smart contracts, when you really start thinking about like first principles, what is a contract? What is an asset? What is a tradable financial instrument? What is money? What do these represent? How are they conceived of in law? What is useful information? What's not useful information? And one of the things that became pretty obvious to me fairly early in the process was, commerce in general is rooted in contracts. Everything is built upon a foundation of contracts, the legal framework. And really all it is just a set of rules, a set of guidelines to guide the conduct of commercial activities between contracting parties. So even in, if you take in, for example, a digital banknote issued by a central bank, let's think of the most basic, most tradable, most marketable product in the industry. It's really sort of like it's a liability that the bank has issued. It's a tool for you to go and for swap with other things, but there's still a set of terms and conditions that govern its usage, right? That govern its ability to be traded. So there's a contractual element to it. There's regulations that are largely like contract terms and conditions that a state issues that other people have to behave. That's part of their circle of control. And that applies to financial instruments as well, like shares, for example. There's terms and conditions that the company and the members have formed around, and those restrictions are placed upon every secondary trade, every issuance, the way that you can use and gain value from the share of the company, like the distribution of profits and what have you. So you even go to coupons. Let's go to a really non-regulated version of it. A company has issued you with, let's say, 20% off or a free Coke at McDonald's. There's terms and conditions. There's usually an expiration date. There's, you can't use, sometimes they'll say only one coupon is good per person. So you can't have like 20 of them and come up and submit them all at once. There's a whole bunch of terms and conditions that come with it. So everything is based on contracts. And I think it's worth, I've done a lot of thinking, but I think it's worth thinking about that when thinking in the context of tokens. So tokens are very sexy right now, and the ability to trade them on the blockchain is cool. But what does it mean? What does a token mean? So if you look on like CoinGecko, or you look at one of these charts and you see all these tokens and they have different names. If we take aside from the native tokens that kind of represent a blockchain, the ability for blockchain to work, what are they? what do they represent? It's very, very confusing. There's no clarity around it. You cannot build a financial system, a global commercial system around that lack of clarity. So this is where our thinking started to lead into basically understanding what these things were and thinking about the fields that are required, thinking about the contractual side of things as well. Like, what does this contract represent? What does this asset represent? How does the contract control the asset? And our protocol is very much about that. It's really focusing on the smart contract, the contractual side first, establishing the rules by which this asset can be traded or can be used and consumed and derive value from. But we also looked at the contractual side of things, and we thought, like, well, is it just going to be a PDF that defines the entire value of the contract? And you basically have this like token with a ticker symbol, and you trade it around. And anytime someone wants to know what it's about and what the value is or what the rights and rules are, you have to go open this PDF and dive through it and like figure out all this legal prose that may be 20, 30, 40 pages, or it might even be a white paper in some crazy cases. We thought that was a complete non-starter. That's not the future. You cannot have, again, a global commercial system, a financial system that operates on that kind of ambiguity. You need to standardize. You need to think about how you can make this much more interoperable and lower the cognitive overhead on trading these, understanding these, appreciating these, and ultimately using them in the economy. So as a little bit of a divergent path from taking the tour of the gut, but I think it's important, just kind of a little intro into the premise of what we're trying to do and the assets and the definitions and why we've named the things we've done and why we focused on that. So when you think about contracts as the root foundational piece to the commercial side of things, to all these tokens, that's why we think it's so appropriate for entities to be the defining workspace or factors. So an example here is an individual. So I'm a natural person. This is my individual account. So I legally own these assets and I owe these liabilities. No one else does. And as you can see down here at the bottom, I'm logged in as myself. I'm basically the principal of myself. But when you go to a company, when you go to a trust, when you go to other types of entities, you've got different roles where there's different rights and responsibilities that different people play, other natural people play in the administration of that entity, so to speak. So that's, there's a director or chief executive. They might have a purchasing officer or CFO who have responsibilities to sign off on transactions, make purchase decisions. They might need the board of directors to sign off on transactions above a certain value. There's a whole bunch of rules that come into play. So those rules can often be codified in a contract. So you might have a constitution or shareholders agreement or arts amends, what have you, where they will actually give specific rules about who can do what and to what extent, what the limits are, and how they go about it. So if they want to push past a certain limit, who do they get approval from and in what threshold? So these are like very, very real and common administrative type terms and conditions that govern tokens that represent membership or ownership or units in a trust, anything that has to do with an entity. So when we're really thinking about smart contracts and tokens, and we're thinking about shares, for example, or units in a trust or memberships in some kind of entity, we want to think all about the terms and conditions that ultimately govern that. And that's what these entities are all about. It's setting a entity contract is really the term we use at the protocol level. So when you create one of these new entities, to start with, we haven't got that functionality ready on the app yet, but we are working on it. To start with, you either register an existing entity, and you would basically put in the rules that the actual entity is going to be governed by. You nominate the directors and the key people in the company, and you give them responsibilities. And those responsibilities would be tied to private keys that would be tied to on-chain actions. Part of that process of registering a new entity would be also issuing shares, for example, or issuing tokens representing membership in that entity. And so that would be an on-chain action. And that user, the token holder who owns that membership, now has the ability to exercise their rights through signatures from the address, with using the private key of the public address that actually owns the token, the membership token. And that kind of leads into things like governance and having resolutions, on-chain resolutions and voting and what have you to kind of affect change and permit certain things. So I want to just go back to that. So an entity contract is all about, it's a smart contract. It's built within our protocol. It's a company, it's an organization, it's a trust, it's a partnership. It has members of the entity, but it also has officers or directors or administrators, special classes of roles that are common, codified into law. Typically, most countries will like require that you have a director, at least one, and require that you have certain roles filled. So the entity contract that we have on chain accounts for all of that. That's what it's built for. That's what the code that we have in our smart contract agent, in our protocol, that's the complexity, that's the business logic that makes this really exceptional, and it's going to make this really profound once we're starting to roll out these features and start to go a bit more mainstream and build some of the other things that we want into it. So there's a class of contracts called the entity contracts, which are really these spaces, and they govern all the assets that that entity can control. Now, those assets are held by public keys or key pairs and multi-sig arrangements that basically are held by the directors or the nominees or the custodians. You can have all those arrangements built into this app and nominated and controlled by the users, the permissions and the roles. But they're essentially in charge then of spending, receiving, making decisions of the assets that the entity owns. So there's a entity contract component that deals with the actual ownership and governance. Then there's the assets themselves and asset contracts that the entity issues. So an example of an asset contract that an entity might issue is a bond, for example, or coupons or loyalty points. So in that case, when you create a smart contract, an asset contract, you've got bonds that are basically being issued. You've got a contract that defines the rights of that bond, and those bonds will then be sent. So it'll be a liability to the entity, but they'll be traded for cash or something else, some other consideration out into the market, to the market participants, which then effectively by receiving that token representing a bond, for example, they become a counterparty to that asset contract. So that's the two main pillars of our smart contract in terms of conceptual building blocks. You have the entity contracts. They're defined the creation of an entity and the governance. Then you have the asset contracts, which are contracts that control assets that are issued by an entity. And then finally, to round that out is the third piece of the puzzle, which is static contracts. So static contracts are basically, they do not have an asset to them. They're an agreement more like a non-disclosure agreement, an employment agreement, a confidentiality agreement, all those types of agreements that we commonly sign on a regular basis. They're static in nature in the sense that they're not constantly being amended. That's sort of the reason why we call it a static contract. They don't have assets. They're traded regularly, which effectively is an amendment to the contract, amendment to the share register, which is part of the contract, for example. So it's largely a static and it's used for reference only. So in the future, the contracting parties, if they have disagreements or things aren't done the way they should be, well, they can refer back to the static contract. And our protocol also accounts for all those contracts. So where we don't have a smart contract agent with a static contracts, we have structured fields and codified terms and conditions to make that an improved experience. And of course, all of that's stored on chain as well. So you benefit from the immutability, the decentralized nature, everything that's positive about Bitcoin as a data layer, those contracts can benefit from. So that's a quick tour of the overall contract and why we've rooted everything in terms of our information architecture, in terms of how people navigate and how everything is controlled. It's all done with smart contracts or contracts at the base, and entities being the owners of the and owners of the liabilities and owners of the assets. And then you've got all the roles that are also represented by tokens like directors and administrators and things like that, but they're all controlled by the entity contract. So I hope that's clear. I know I was just talking a lot here, but that's, I think, a really important thing to understand and appreciate, because it has a way of, when you really think about how all these features, when they aggregate, they result in a really improved experience compared to what's possible today. So most companies in general will be familiar with the heavily paper-based Word documents and PDFs that we use today for shareholder agreements, for investment agreements, all kinds of transactions, things like that. It's non-standardized. The governance is non-standardized. Once again, you get another Word document that you've drafted up. It's basically a loosely formed contract. You might do another one for a different company, and in effect, it's the same thing. There's very little difference between it, but it's worded and structured visually and or informationally totally different. The prose is different, and you have to go through it line by line to make sure that there's no risk to you. And that applies to every interaction that you have. So by making these smart, by making software enforce these terms and conditions, providing sort of bumpers, if you will. So in the bowling world, the kids have bumpers down the lane. So if you're bowling, you can't get in the gutter. We like to think of a smart contract as very much like that. Smart contract is not something that's, outside of law. It's not something that man has no effect on. It's just the way it is. Law can come in, law can confiscate, law can do what it always has done, because at the end of the day, we're humans and we live in a human world. But what software can do is make the processes more efficient. It can stop us from making silly errors. It can stop us from having to dive deep into contractual terms and conditions to make sure we're following the letter of the law, because the software will tell us. It'll just guide us and it will make our lives a lot easier in that regard. So our platform will be an administrator's dream. I truly believe that. And there's really nothing like it. There's definitely comparisons in the old world, but the software was built a long time ago, and it does not compare to the feature set and the value that this can provide. So those are the workspace entities. And when we say, in some of my presentations before, I would talk a lot about one app for your entire financial life. That's a dream that a lot of financial fintech companies have. It's sort of like even Elon Musk, his original vision for PayPal was one consolidated app, one hub for your entire financial life, had your mortgages, your credit cards, your accounts, everything in one place. I think it's a dream that a lot of people share. We share that as well. But we would argue that before blockchain, before Bitcoin in particular, and before smart contracts that had the features that we have in the tokenized protocol, it was not realistic. It was never going to happen. You're never really going to be able to get a really great user experience where you'd be able to collect everything in one place and have software really make it a great experience. We believe that with smart contracts on the scene now, that future is in sight. Now we're appreciative of how the complexity and how many parties are involved and how many jurisdictions. So this is very much a long-term vision that we're building towards. There's stepping stones that we're going to use to get there, things that you have to do, we're low-hanging fruit, things that are obvious improvements for customers on both sides, and that it's easy to do regulatory, easy to do capital, CapEx, all those kinds of things. But in the long term, we want to build up to something like that. So in this entity, in my my entity, what I own, this is my little workspace here. So my records, so it's more than just your assets. It's more than just your contracts. You got some governance features in there. So really it's like your commercial records, right? These are all commercial records that are on chain. And this is your full account of all your records that you've been involved in as part of you as an entity in your commercial life. So to start with, up here, we've got your cash balance. So this is just really your cash on hand, the sum total of all your Australian dollars, British pounds, BSV, cash-like and cash-like equivalents. Send, this is your basic send function. So you can basically send any of your assets to another party. So of course we use Paymail as our main tool to use to connect to others and exchange addresses and make the payment. But we also have the ability to do BSV addresses like any old school wallet. I'll go through and show examples of all this in a second. Just give you a tour first. On this side, we got like new payment requests. So this is actually sending a payment request to someone else with the details of what you want paid and what have you. So we've actually not done BIP 270 for this. We've got our own on-chain messaging protocol, but we're also going to adopt BIP 70, and we're also going to adopt SVV messaging channels, and we'll be quite interoperable there. We don't have a lot of strong conviction with any particular messaging protocol at the moment. We just need something that's going to work, and this is something that we thought was interesting and compelling. Over here, we've got a few different screens to look at. So we got offer or trade. This is your tool for doing atomic swaps. So an atomic swap is interesting in that it requires two parties to sign off on it, and also two parties to add their details about what they're trading and what UTXOs or what which tokens they're gonna actually trade specifically. So in this case, you use your Paymail handle to select who you're gonna trade with. You pick what you want to trade. So you'd be requesting pound sterling. You'd be offering, let's see, one goodie bag. You type in how much you're gonna send, and then you essentially send it all. Again, I'll come back to this. I'll do a proper demo in a second. I just want to keep on with this tour. Below here, we've got receive BSV. So this is just if you want to deposit BSV into your wallet. So you've got your QR code, you've got your address, and you got your deposit handle. Below here, so this is where some of the financial infrastructure components come in. So this is all like lurking below the scenes for us, lurking below the water. but we've done a lot of work in integrating with financial infrastructure or bank accounts. So the idea is that we are ready to really take on e-money. So we could have a bank account, we could integrate with that bank account, we could link accounts that the user has, that's theirs, it's outside of our purview, it's just their personal bank accounts, and they'll be able to send and withdraw between those bank accounts. So here you can see when I've clicked deposit funds, it wants you to link a bank account first, and then you can take you through the process of depositing. It'll give you all the details, our bank details that we use to pool our customer's account. So essentially when you do an e-money or a stablecoin, you have a pooled customer account, a custody account, trust account, omnibus account. The money from their account, their bank account goes into the pooled account with all the other customers' account. And we've automated a teller, we call it, which is basically like an agent that would automatically send the currency type and currency tokens from the treasury address of the smart contract of the currency token contract to their address. And then the reverse operation would happen when they want to withdraw. So they'd send it to the treasury address, the teller would receive that, and then our software would kick the money back out to their account in the proportionate amount. So these are, you can see they're a bit rough on the user interface. We've been converting from our old wireframes to our new, and that's part of the scramble we've done in the last 4 weeks. But you can see that the functionality on the back end is done, the front end's a bit rough, and has not actually working yet. And then withdraw funds, the same thing. So it's just link a bank account, but you get the two functions. So then we move on to activity. Basically, we've got an activity here. This is your log, your activity log, your feed, if you will, of all the commercial events and actions that are relevant to you as an entity. So obvious ones, sending, receiving payments and different assets. You can see you got a couple here, examples. So sent coupons to Dan, he's one of our developers. If I open it up, you got a modal, it shows you some more details. So you got your 1x VIP dinner coupon, -1 for me. So that's my perspective, I've lost a coupon, but to him, it'd be a +1. And then you got I haven't got this set up to show you what's on chain, but basically if I click that, it pops up and it shows you what the transaction is and the details there. Receive Bitcoin. So this is from, I think it's a Money Button wallet that I sent some BSV earlier. We've just fuzzed that out for now as a patch, but that will just basically show a nondescript icon in the address or addresses. You go down here, you got traded assets. So this is like an actual atomic swap that had happened before. So you can see the arrows. This is all correct. We had a little glitch before and we couldn't rebuild to fix it, but you'll see that some of this is just a little bit off, but these values are correct. It was Scott, just the wording's not right there. Going forward, so another example that's sent to Andrew earlier, some Australian dollars. Now here's something that's a bit more interesting that you probably haven't seen before, but this is the actual creation of or issuance of assets that I myself as an entity have issued, and the contract itself that formed to create those assets. So here we go, contract executed. So in the tokenized protocol world, the terminology we use, is a contract offer and a contract formation action. So we have a request response model in the tokenized protocol, meaning that the users send a request action to the chain. So that's a transaction that's signed by only the user or users. And the other side, you've got a smart contract agent for a particular contract that's addressed to it. So there's an on-chain public key that you send a little bit of Bitcoin to, that's effectively addressing it to the smart contract. So the smart contract agent is constantly reading the blockchain, looking for messages addressed to it. So when it sees the request response, it will then see it's addressed to it, validate the payload, validate the action itself, compare that to the state of the contract. Obviously, is there any double spends? Do they have access to the assets they're trying to spend? Are there any terms and conditions that are being broken? And these are terms and conditions that can apply not only to that specific transaction, but contract-wide ones, policies effectively that can change with time. So they can change independent of the script that a particular asset's held at. And that's a really important feature, which I'll touch upon a little bit later when I get into the contract drafting. So you've essentially got here, this is what we're showing here with the two request response. You've got the executed by signatories, which is the request message, as the on-chain transaction there for you, and then activated by the contract operator. So obviously this was validated. It was a response in accordance with the protocol, and it's executed. So the contract itself is formed, and now you can add assets to the contract. So forgive, these are exactly the same. That's another bug, but they're supposed to be different. But that one's right, that one's wrong. So once we got the contract executed, you can go, and there's also some assets that have been attached to the contract that have then been issued. So in this case, you got coupons issued, you got asset, 1 free large soft drink, 10 million coupons issued by me. The contract itself is the cool summer drink giveaway. And then you got, again, the request response model. So this is the asset definition. The issuer, myself, I've defined what I want these assets to be. I've filled in the fields. I've published it to the blockchain. Smart contract agent has read the blockchain and has then responded to say, yes, these assets are issued, and they're issued to the treasury address. So you've got the treasury address, which is every smart contract has, and it's controlled by the contract administrators. And what effectively means is if you're an entity and you've issued a liability, you've issued some shares to treasury, or you've issued some bonds to treasury, you have a liability and an asset that's equal. And when you trade the asset away, then that liability remains, but then you've replaced that with cash or some consideration. So that's what we call the address that the issuer controls, and where all assets originate from when you first issue them. And then you trade away from the treasury address controlled by the contract administrator, which is effectively going to be a nominee by the entity, like a director or an executive or something like that. So just close that. And I will go through the contract drafting, formation, and asset issuing process in a second with our actual tool. But I'll just quickly finish off the tour here. So those are the key actions that you want to see here. On the side here, we've got, and there will be more to come. So when you've got amendments to a contract, when you've got distributions like interest is owed, or coupons or bonds, what have you, that'll be featured here in the activity as you receive them, or if you disperse them. Then you'll also have the likes of resolutions. So if a particular entity contract has you're a shareholder for, and there's a shareholder resolution, well, you'll be notified in the activity feed that there's a resolution and that your vote is required, and that will tell you the terms of it, like this is the threshold, this is the proposal, blah, 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 and all of that will be a part of this activity feed. And there's actually going to be quite a bit more too. So establishing relationships, drafts, reviews, all the revisions when you're doing different stages of the contract lifecycle will be a part of this activity feed. So we still got to flesh a lot of that out, but this is the core features as they need to be. So your My Open Items, this is all about action items on you. So if someone's asking you, they've sent you a trade offer, and you've got to respond either by rejecting it, not a good enough trade, or accepting it and signing it and sending it back, these will live here. Same with your votes, resolutions, things like that. And then pending others. Pending others will be something like when you got multi-sig workflows, you get trades, when you've got resolutions, you've got other people that have to sign off on certain things. So these actions, when they're dependent on others to do, they wait here and they list it, and you can monitor their progress. So that's going to be really important for the multi-sig workflows. So if you got 3 of 5 people in your company that need to sign off on anything, well, your signature happens here, but then everyone else's you'll see them accumulate before they're broadcast. Obviously, a peer net worth is a term more applicable to an individual. In a company, it might be equity up here, shareholders' equity. In an organization, that's essentially what it is, just equity. And that's just over time. So you could go negative, of course, in this, but in this case, we just show positive as I've accumulated some assets over the last few days. Up here, so this is our treasury. This is where all of our assets and liabilities are held. So this is not a balance sheet. This is more like a live snapshot of a partial balance sheet in some ways, but it's really just the digital assets that you have that you've issued, for example, as a liability, or that you control as an asset. So again, we want every asset in the world that can be tokenized to be tokenized. We want this to look like a very full featured, every type of asset you can possibly imagine. Of course, we're going to include other types of filters and ways of managing this as it becomes full. So if you've got loyalty points, coupons, currencies, shares, investments, all that kind of stuff, you're going to want to consolidate that and structure and break it down a little more. But for now, for what we're doing, these purposes, this is a perfectly fine way of dealing with it. Just a nice list. So you can see here, Australian dollar, Bitcoin SV, pound sterling. So these are our vision for on-chain e-money. And then you got all the coupons. So as part of this demo and part of where we're at in terms of building this app, we've only got coupons and a few different currencies available and the Bitcoin SV, of course, but we're going to be working on adding a bunch more shortly, and we'll announce that and maybe do a webinar at the time if that makes sense. That's new transactions, really just a repeat of this. Just gives you a few more options, all there, send requests, all that. And then down here, your assets total, so it just sums it up, the value. Quickly here, you got your issuer, which in the case, Bank of England, all that kind of stuff. So I think you guys get the picture there. So contracts, this is really important. This is the heart of it all. This is what everything is controlled by. And this tool is really, really important to get right. So we're not just challenging tokens and the other people in the space. We're really trying to challenge legal tech. Big picture, of course, but we want to lay the foundations that, eventually people start to adopt in a more universal manner, this type of approach to contract drafting and contract administration. And we think that it's a very difficult challenge to do in terms of adoption. It's very difficult to bring in new tech in such a conservative industry. And there's a lot of legal tech companies out there that are working on this problem and having some success and some great products out there, but it's very difficult to get everyone on this new system. We think that the smart contracts, particularly in tokens and blockchain, present an opportunity and an impetus for actually starting that change, right? We believe the change is going to be client driven. In the legal industry, it's not going to be lawyers telling clients what tools to use. It's going to be the clients demanding that the lawyers accommodate particular use cases or approaches they want to take. So we think it's important for companies like us and in this space who are interested in tokens, smart contracts, to actually, work with their lawyers to issue tokenized assets, to do their entity contracts on chain with our protocol, with our app. And because we're paying the money, the clients are paying the money to the lawyers, I'm sure they'll be interested and more likely to cooperate. And I think that is the way that you start to get real change happening and the potential for a real universal standard to emerge. And when I say universal standard, we're talking about something like an email equivalent, but for contracts and tokenized assets. And what we see that being a possibility in, say, 20, 25 years, a truly global standard. At least that's what we're gunning for. So quickly here, these are contracts that have been active now. They've been signed, and where they're assets ones, they've been issued to the Treasury. So I'll just give a quick overview. So the last demo, we had more features here. We've actually hidden them to make it a little bit simpler, but I can't speak to them here. So essentially, you've got two major pieces. You get your header and you get your assets. And this is the very, very basic minimum that's required for issuing some tokenized assets. So a header is all about these codified terms and conditions, these fields that are important to every contract. It's common to static contracts, asset contracts, entity contracts. And it's really about giving some context about, where this contract is taking place, where the disputes are going to be settled, what kind of law is going to be used to interpret the terms and conditions, who's involved. So where you've got a static contract, you have counterparties. Where you've got an asset or issuer entity contract, you've got an issuing entity. And then, of course, the counterparties become the owners of the tokens themselves that are issued. Down here is the assets. So these are the assets that this smart contract controls and issues. So in this example, we only picked one. So we just picked one coupon, one free large soft drink, issue quantity, whatever that is, a million or whatever, face value, 1.5 pounds, expiration date expires with a contract, which is listed up here, the duration, and then transfer policy. So a coupon is a very simple example, which is why we've used it as a first case. But you can even we have some other fields that we haven't shown here that are part of the coupon, but you can have regional restrictions and you can have venue fields. So regional restrictions can be enforced by like an identity oracle where this coupon can be tradable, but it can only be tradable within, let's say, the UK or within Australia. And that the identity oracle can actually enforce that. Obviously, you can extrapolate that thinking and think about financial instruments that need to be registered, and more importantly, need to be whitelisted so that only accredited investors or investors from a certain country or certain status can be able to partake in it. And our protocol and our system accounts for that in a automated fashion. So software can basically attest to the validity of that without keeping the information private. So it's sort of like a yes/no type function. And it's built into it. Really, really important. I'll touch upon that a little bit more because that's quite a big topic, especially if people have got questions about it. So definitions, every contract pretty much, or a lot of contracts will have a number of definitions, and they're simply to give clarity over the exact meaning of a particular word as it's used in that contract. So it's really, really important. And for us, we've seen that, everyone's seen this called many different things: dictionary, definitions, library, I think I've even seen called before. So basically they'll have a section somewhere, and sometimes it'll be treated as like a section or a big clause, and we'll just list all the words and they'll list the exact meaning. So we think that that can be structured and standardized and just called definitions. Let's just everyone call it definitions, and then have a field type or data type that allows for us to elegantly define those words and for software to make sense of it and to be able to pull that data out and to be able to reuse it. And then more importantly is to be able to, pulling my mouse, to have those definitions referenced with software, being able to reference it in a mouse holdover. You can see the definition pop up. And if you change the definition up here, it gets reflected throughout the body of the agreement. So again, software can just make the drafting and review process much, much more elegant. Variables, very, very similar to definitions. It has a similar purpose. It has the same properties or features as I just described, where you can reference in the body of agreement, which I will explain more in a second. And it also has the benefit of attaching a data type to it and perhaps a value that can be used in the contract. And again, software can extract a meaning from and can use as part of the enforcement of that contract. So for example, price, interest rate, weather event variable, things like that can be interpreted by different oracles or even just by parties, and the software can just pull it out and let you know what it is right away, so you know what you owe or you know what you're paid and things like that. So I've done a bit of work on this. I got the framework done, but we haven't touched this yet because we got to lay some of the foundational pieces first. But this is the big picture framework that is coming, and that's what we're working on. So administration, the way to think about this is how does this contract get managed into the future? What are the governance rules or the terms and conditions that allow for amendments and changes to it over time? So if you have a particular field that's, let's say, the issue quantity, you can say as part of the administration that this is a locked field. This quantity cannot be changed, and it can only be changed if every single token holder agrees to it with a resolution, an on-chain resolution. So you put a proposal to say, we want to change this value to this value, and the smart contract would reject it. The only way you'd be able to do it is if you first did a proposal, on-chain proposal as part of our protocol, and all the token holders voted in favor such that it passed the threshold that was specified in this administration field. And then the smart contract agent will then permit a change in that quantity to the value. So every single field in our protocol can have customizable restrictions or permissions and voting thresholds and requirements that reference to the rules here. So in administration, you basically have voting systems. They define the type of vote it is, whether it's a plurality vote or a, like if it's say a 40% threshold, that has to be, as a total number of voters, has to be over 40%, or of the people that voted, an absolute and a majority. So it's absolute majority or a majority or plurality are three types of voting systems. So you choose what type of voting system you have, how that threshold applies to the voting population, and then what the threshold itself is, and then who can vote on it. So that's the voting system, and that basically gets applied or specified in the administration fields here. And then you go through and you can reference every single field and apply it to a particular voting system. Now, in practice, and with consideration of certain laws and regulations, there's a lot of standardization here. You're going to have certain fields that are always going to be always changeable by the administration of the company, like the directors. Other ones that are going to require, like, say, a super vote for shareholders. There's just no ways about it because it'd be illegal to do. But of course, we can accommodate anything. And it would be our job and the job of other companies that take up building around this type of solution, or building a solution like this, to kind of make it a lot easier for the customer to have defaults in play and to have the explanations and things like that to make it really easy. And then finally, we got body of agreement. So body of agreement is really just about the legal prose. So this gives the clarity and precision to the contract. So you have, it's just English words. You got a sentence or sentence structure as you would in any agreement. We've broken it down, just like definitions and variables. We've broken it down in accordance with a fellow named Kingsley Martin, who's a pioneer, a brilliant mind, and a pioneer in trying to standardize contracts. He's done a huge amount of work, and I can actually link in the chat. Let me just do that now before I forget. Just link this in there if anyone's interested. But so I highly recommend. He's got a lot of work. He's got a blog. He's got a company. He's got even a website that has contract standards where he's done a lot of work kind of teasing apart the structure of a contract in terms of what common clauses you have in different contracts, in terms of the language, the way he presents the information, the way he structures it visually, all that kind of stuff. And it's extremely elegant. And it's something that was a source of inspiration for us when we were thinking about this problem. So we have based our body of agreement in spirit on some of the work that he's done. And it largely comes down to like your clause, like what the name of the clause is. And then on this side, you have basically the actual clause itself. And then of course you get the normal structuring, like sub clauses and all that kind of stuff. So everything in a contract is going to be built into these, and it's going to be on chain. We have the ability to encrypt whatever field you want to keep it private, or you can leave it in plain text. There's arguments for both sides, and we can get more into that on a separate discussion. But we have full flexibility to preserve whatever wishes a customer would want, for example. Finally, we've got down here issuer. So in this case, it's just me. But of course, you'd have signatories in a company, organization, and you'd have to have obviously get a multi-sig kind of arrangement where they'd all have to sign off on it before you can execute it. Just quickly up here, it's the status. So it kind of gives you like a historical view of what happened in terms of executing the contract. So as I was mentioning before, you got the request response. This kind of shows some of the basic things that have happened. And when it actually happened, it gives you a signal to say, yes, it went through. So I will do a quick contract draft and show you what that's like. I'm sure your minds can imagine what it's like after that little intro, but we'll name this one October giveaway. We'll make it the Bitcoin Association. That actually wouldn't be there because the issuer would be a Bitcoin Association. So we'll take that out. Let's imagine it's a Bitcoin Association to keep it pure. October giveaway, Bitcoin Association October giveaway makes sense. Then you got this is an asset contract coupons. Issuer me in this case because it's an account. So duration, you can pick whatever date you want. So I'm not sure if this is actually going right now. I'm just going to play it safe. Leave it at that because I know that one works. Governing law. So we've got two examples here. Of course, we've got a repo. You can see this. It's in our specification resources on our GitHub. So you can see we've already developed a full list of every single legal system, what it's called, like law of England and Wales. We've got all that built in, and we even got some extra information to kind of help with the experience. And then jurisdiction, of course, we'll just make it match in this case, but you can have lots of examples where those are different, particularly when it comes to the law of England and Wales and some of the tax havens and things like that. So assets, in this case, we've got one. So we'll say Bitcoin Association, 1 free beer, and we'll say that this is the next meetup. So let's say it can be a pretty rowdy party. So we'll issue out 250 of them. And then we'll say the face value, I don't know, 5 pounds, I think, of beers in England. And then we'll say infinite duration. So expires the contract again. And then we'll say it's transferable. So when we issue them out, we can do like a promo on Twitter, or we can do a promo however you like, issue them out, get people to come in, and they can transfer them if they want. But you know that because they're on chain and they're token, that only one person can redeem them, and that's it. There's no double spending in that regard. So we got the basics set down. We'll do one more. So I'll add another coupon just because we can. So these are, this will have each coupon or each asset will have an asset ID. So the asset ID is made up of a field, which is basically your asset type. It's got 3 characters. And then you've got your actual string, which is like a random string that's actually derived from the contract address. So contract address is just like a Bitcoin address. You generate it randomly. It is effectively a wallet of sorts. So the smart contract agent uses that address, and it controls a private key to sign the messages of its request actions and to send Bitcoin and what have you. So that contract address is randomly generated, but the asset IDs, or at least the asset codes, are generated in a sequential basis from that contract address. So you can deterministically, just by looking at asset ID, you can kind of work out which asset or which contract is tied to. So it's linked and predictable and deterministic. And then we've got here your coupon too. So your coupon name will say this is free pizza. Oh yeah. And then we'll say, well, 100 of those should be good. Free slice of pizza just because I'm perfect. Face value, we'll say 250. We'll say it's $3. As far as the contract getting, I don't want to mess with that one. I think that one's playing a bit of trouble here. So we can continue to add assets. I'm not going to bother because it's going to waste everyone's time. But these are essentially this one contract, and the terms and conditions around it control each asset. And when you get into other more complex contracts, there's a lot more terms and conditions that are up here that control all of them. And we call those contract-wide terms and conditions. So they apply to every token holder, and they can be changed, and they apply to every token holder. That change happens instantly. You don't need to reissue the assets. You can just make that change if it's in accordance with the terms and conditions, and it applies to the whole ecosystem, which is really, really important for use cases that are coming up that I'll get into more later, another webinar, I think. So basically we got the two assets here. You can create as many as you want. These are non-fungible in the sense that they're totally separate, but the units are fungible for each of them. So you got 250 units of this one, 100 units of that one. Pretty standard. So here I'm going to sign. So this is an authentication step. So you can see here, confirm with your mobile app. I'm not sure what that's all about. Don't ignore that, it's working. So that's the authenticator app. So I'll try and do it again in a second, but basically like you got your biometrics where your PIN comes up and you can approve it. So any kind of action that's like high value or high risk in this, like sending money and things like that, can all be tied to the authenticator app, including logging in. The authenticator app is also interesting because we have built into it the KYC onboarding process. So we've actually done all that work. So we have not only the infrastructure to store user data, but we also have the onboarding experience. So like if you're familiar with neobanks or modern apps where you've got the ability to take pictures of your documents, your passports, take a picture of your photo to do a liveness test, things like that, processes it to make sure that it's valid documentation and a real person. And then you get essentially the KYC has been completed. So that is a separate process to a desktop app. It means that you always do it on your phone, but you always are required to have the authenticator app as part of the experience, as part of the desktop. So it adds security, it adds, it ticks boxes when it comes to like certain regulations in certain countries, and it's just a better experience in general, we believe. So you can see here, all those processes have happened. So the contract was formed, the assets were issued to Treasury. So again, to Treasury, which is the entity's Treasury, and then you can view those assets. There you go, one free slice of pizza, 100 coupons. And I'm sure you can all see it, but I can't see it. What's happening there? All right, I think we found a new bug. Oh, there you go. Sorry, my mistake. There it is, 250 coupons, blind. And then on the liability side, one slice pizza, and then one free beer line and meetup. There you go. Activity, there you go. One free slice of pizza, 100 coupons, blah, blah, blah. The other assets, those are two assets issued. It shows two events, and then you get your contract for it. Atomic swap. Scott, are you ready, mate? Should we do a quick atomic swap? Let's give a thumbs up from him. Yeah, all right, sweet. So we'll do a quick trade. So we'll do a trade of the assets we just created. So I'm going to request pound sterling from Scott. We'll say we'll trade up 5, and we'll say, hey, we want, look at that pizza going. So we'll say we want 2 of those for £5. So as the rate, that's pounds over the coupon. So So as a quick summary, so this is a trade offer. So this is you put your inputs, you've got your assets that you're proposing, you've got the asset type that you're requesting he return, but you don't know his input at this point. So you're gonna have to request that from him. So you can't have a signature either on this yet. So this is still in early stages. It's sort of a template of what you want the offer to be. And that's why we call it a trade offer. That gives you the rate, network fee. So what we're doing is we're sending this offer message with all the structures of what we want to him. He's going to review, and if he likes it, he'll sign it and send it back for my countersigning, which is then a fully signed transaction or trade that we can then publish to the blockchain and let the smart contract validate. We've actually done this again on-chain messaging. So this entire message is encapsulated as part of an on-chain message that we have as part of our protocol. It can be done with any messaging format as standard. We're happy to work with all of them. Trade offer sent. So you can see here, pending others, it's been sent to Scott. There's all the details there, and he will be looking at it now, and he'll be deciding whether he's gonna sign it. Okay, he's done. There you go. So he sent it back to me now. He's got his signature, the structure is in place. He's added his inputs, he's added his outputs. Now I've just got to make sure it's the same deal that I sent over to him. It is, looks all good. And then I sign the trades or countersign it. So that trade's been executed. So that's an on-chain atomic swap. And what's really interesting there is every component it's important to build trust is done on chain. So we don't have to, between me and Scott, it's not that important that we have that as an on-chain message to have that trade offer. You can do that off-chain quite easily. What matters is the results. But where you've got smart contract agents, we have the smart contract agents when they're coordinating their signatures for the actual final settlement of that, the response for it. You need both signatures from them to make that happen, and they coordinate by an on-chain message. So you can actually see where it's at, and if the agent has stuffed up and needs to resync or come back on later, you can see where it's at and for them to come on. So it's full visibility, full transparency, the entire process. All important and meaningful contractual or commercial events and actions are on-chain and traceable and transparent. So I think that's I haven't got, I don't want to show you relationships just yet. We will show it soon. It's just not ready. But I think when it comes to our November release, we're aiming to have the relationships done. We're aiming to have all the contracts and a few more asset types to play with, the treasury done, and not only the treasury done as I've shown you, but there'll be, when you click on each asset, there'll be asset ID. It'll give you a profile, the details, the important terms and conditions for it. It'll give you a link to the contract, and it'll give you a transaction history for that particular thing. So that's all ready to go in the back end, and our wireframes are done. We're just rushing to get this done for November. So we've got a bit of work to do still. The activity, I think largely what you see here is probably going to be a little bit more polished and things like that, like being able to navigate through time and things like that, but we'll see. So what you see here though, in terms of the core concepts, in terms of the core features and everything up here, basically, except for the actual onboarding, offboarding stuff, is all part of our November private beta that's coming up. So if that's of interest to you from a commercial, personal interest or anything, like please join the waitlist and sign up for it, and then we'll let you know the moment it's ready. So we're going to do it in stages. So you first come, first serve, as well as the most important customers that we deem will likely get ahead in the line. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up a quick this link is for our private beta. Hopefully you guys can see at the top of the little click meeting screen there. There's a little red button. And if you click that, it takes you to a little form you can fill out. You can join the wait list. So you can play with this app as soon as it's ready in November. And it's fully, like, all the payment and stuff works with Money Button and Hand Cash and all that kind of stuff, sending and receiving. So it's pretty much a full featured basic wallet, in addition to the contract side of things, in addition to the token side of things, in addition to the e-money component, in addition to all the KYC onboarding, the financial infrastructure, the onboarding, offboarding gateways, the agents, the wallet agents that we use as part of our operation, all of that. So I I think that I'll stop there in terms of the demo and open it up for Q&A and kind of work through that. I want to keep this fairly informal, and I'm happy to go back and answer any questions or really take it anywhere you guys want. All questions are on the table, business, tech, what have you. Let me just see how this QA thing is working. So QA mode has been enabled. Should I stop sharing my screen for the wallet? Actually, I'll leave it on just in case anyone has any questions about it. Okay. Okay, just give me 2 seconds, guys. Got to read this. Okay, I'll just go one by one. There's not too many right now. So what is Tokenized business model? So we have a few phases. So we have obviously a very ambitious vision. It's going to take a huge amount of money to get there and a lot of time. And we think in general, the timing is too early still. BSV is very underdeveloped. General acceptance of crypto, blockchain, distributed ledger is underdeveloped. We're still a ways away from financial instruments and all that from actually being tokenized assets and being used in like a mainstream way. But we're gearing up for it. Like that's something that was really important. But those stepping stones I was talking about are really, really important for us to operate as a business and to generate revenue and become profitable and to gain traction in a way that allows us to get more funding and to build towards that bigger future. So one of the things that we're focusing on in the short term is offering our platform, like basically a smart contract platform as a service and a wallet as a service. So if people want to add token functionality to their app, to their wallet, to their embed Bitcoin or token related services into their business, into whatever they want to do, we can be the entire back end for you so that it's very, very easy to use. Essentially, you have an API. You don't have to worry about UTXOs. You don't have to worry about any of that kind of like complexity. None of the protocol you have to know about at all. It's all very easy to do. You just need to either integrate your front end with what we do, and you'll get a very performant, complete, feature-rich experience. So that's going to be one of our early stepping stones. And we want to work with partners of all sorts, people who want to experiment with certain types of financial instruments in certain jurisdictions where it's permitted, pilot projects, utility tokens, coupons. So if a business wants to do admission tickets, or a meetup wants to do coupons for their meetup or reward points, or businesses want to do any of that kind of stuff, we're going to have everything you need to be able to do it. And you can integrate it into your business very, very easily. And that's sort of our stepping stone. So we'll be charging money for that, for access to that API. We'll also be releasing our app, which is a business facing as well as consumer facing Bitcoin wallet, token wallet issuance platform, as well as a mobile component. That's probably like the beta that's coming up. You'll see a subset of the functionality, but we're going to be iterating and quickly getting that up to speed. And we'll likely be charging for the business side of things and some fees within the consumer app as well. We haven't settled on exactly, but there'll be transaction fees or like contract creation fees and even maybe like a monthly fee. We're just still mulling over a few options. So I hope that answers your question. Are there plans for implementing a bulletin board? Yes, absolutely. So that's really like for financial instruments. You're really like talking about like a brokerage, like a Craigslist for financial instruments. So an example of a company that does something like that in the traditional world is Forge Global. They're a company that works in the United States, and they basically work to give liquidity to private securities, like private companies, essentially like equity mostly in that space. They've had a lot of demand. They charge 10% on every transaction to broker it, to list it, and then to facilitate the transaction when they match a buyer and seller up. And it's similar to crowdfunding, like some crowdfunding platforms and things like that. And there's a lot of other fintech plays that have similar approaches. So we do want to eventually have a marketplace as well, but there's some licenses involved, and we've got our stepping stones to get there. So of course, if other people have use cases and marketplaces, we as our wallet as a service, our infrastructure component, we can plug into the back end and take care of a lot of that stuff for you. So if you're interested in that capacity, then we can make that a better experience. And what's unique, so if you think about how a lot of fintech companies operate today, they're their own little data silos. And to engage in a lot of them means you're spreading your financial life out, right? You've got records here, records here, records here. What we can do with our protocol and Bitcoin SV and our platform is you can have a seamless way of moving between all those fintech offerings where they focus on their particular offering and their experience and their particular instruments, but they're tokenized and they're universal and they're brought back into one central place, and you can move between apps and have everything collated in the same spot. So we've actually had quite a bit of interest from fintech platforms that do that kind of thing, just to do exactly that. So this next one, does an asset, example fiat currency, first need to be tokenized by someone else on BSV to function in the system, or can it handle external assets as well? External assets. So every tokenized asset, every financial instrument is issued by someone. So even like everything, gold, let's say gold is issued by God. But I mean, any financial instrument that we have today, paper money, like fiat money, even BSV is sort of issued by, I guess, Satoshi or the miners, like miners really. Everything's issued from someone. So if you have an asset, like a financial instrument that represents the ownership rights over something in the real world, a commodity, a business, what have you, it's issued by someone, and the terms and conditions give clarity about what that represents in terms of value. So you can package up, like let's say you wanted to do the Mona Lisa, they wanted to sell it off and have some kind of tokenized ownership scheme. The way you'd probably do it, I think, is you'd have a company formed, it's like a special purpose vehicle almost, that just holds that one asset, the Mona Lisa, and you'd have shareholders invest into the company to buy it. So they're the legal owners of that asset, and you nominate a director or directors that oversee the administration of that asset. They may hire like people to go and take it to different museums, and the money and revenue that they generate from that activity would be part of the earnings of that company and be distributed to shareholders. So when you're talking about physical assets, even on a very small scale, you're typically talking about some legal structure like a company or a trust or something like that, that effectively allows for the ownership of it, and the ownership units would be tokenized. And I can say a lot more on that, but one of the things that we're going to usher in, we believe, including the app itself, the protocol and the blockchain and microtransactions, those sort of combination of things, they can allow us to do that kind of model, but on a very small scale, because it becomes administratively feasible and cost-wise feasible. So it's a very nuanced argument. There's a lot to be talked about there. There's white papers and things like that, but we think that the line is going to change fundamentally. And the most important part is really the user experience component, and the protocol, having smart contracts play a role there. But also, probably more importantly, is the ledger and the ability to do microtransactions. That's the game changer in my view. But there's a lot to be said on that one. So thanks for the question, John. How to create the smart contract on Tokenized on BSV. I might come back to that one because it's a big one. Any plans for internal tracking tools for the tokens issued, or should we just? Okay, so absolutely. So you'll notice that when let's say tokenized shares, tokenized instruments, debt instruments, like the issuer and the directors of the company that have issued it always want to know 99% of the time who they're actually who the contracting party is, right? That's important to them, right? Because it has an impact on their company, right? Who they owe money to or who owns their company is critical for the company's operations. It presents a risk. So part of our app and part of the identity Oracle service and some of the identity layer stuff that's going on that is coming and that we're working on and we have a solution for. It hasn't been fully implemented yet / integrated with the regulators, but we've conceived of the whole design is about connecting up that information so that you have full visibility of your register, your share register, who they are, your contact details, your debt register, all of that, right? That's really, really important. So the blockchain manually is never going to be a mainstream solution. There'll always be tools, reporting tools, tokenized app, things like that you'll be able to get that information. In terms of I may have missed. Okay, so I hope I answered your question satisfactorily there. I'm not actually 100% sure what you mean by that, but if blockchain manually never is going to be the case, no matter what the spirit of your question was, it's always going to be done through tools like the tokenized app, things like that. even future types of blockchains that might have like a better user experience that hides all that, abstracts it all away, and just gives you lists and registers of the status of a company, for example, or a particular asset contract. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so if the Bank of England was involved and they issued 1 million tokens of the pound sterling, then it would be those digital currency, those tokens would be just pounds. As simple as that, like a digital banknote. If you're getting into like stable coin, like an intermediary step, you're likely going to have a private issuer that has a custodial trust omnibus style account with a bank account where the traditional fiat is stored, and the assets that are issued on chain will basically be like a security of sorts that are on the issuer to redeem. And it's really just like a deposit certificate effectively, or like a zero interest bond or something. There's a few different ways to do it, or a coupon even. So the important thing is if the Bank of England issues it, it's real digital banknote. If anyone else does it, it's effectively a hack. It becomes a security of the actual instrument itself. So in the case of the way the world works today, the banking system, really only the banks have access to real pound sterling, like digital pound sterling, digital banknotes. All of the money that's deposited with them is effectively a demand deposit, a loan, and they loan it out as demand deposits. Like they're not even really loaning out cash unless you withdraw it in actual banknotes. That's nearly always the case. So today, customers like retail and consumers and even businesses do not have access to digital banknotes. It's only demand deposits through banks, and banks are the only ones that have access to the digital pounds and what have you. So again, I hope that was a bit academic, but I hope that answered your question. Oracle Sec. I'm not sure what that means. I think so. If you mean oracles, so oracles just mean like a trusted data feed. So like an entity that operates a service, technical service, and they will submit data to the recipient of the Oracle feed, and it will have signatures, and that Oracle will be trusted by the entity to provide accurate, attested to data. It can be anything. So we have 3 classes of it that are important to the tokenized protocol. Event oracles, which basically like submit the results of financial transactions or events, weather, natural phenomenon like that you can measure, sports games, things like that. Then you got authority oracles and identity oracles, and they're really oracles that attest to identity. For example, like we've done a KYC on this address. We're not gonna tell you who the person is or give their identifying details away, but here's an attestation and the data itself to say that this public key is attached to identity and that you can trade with it and will be accountable for it is essentially the model. And authority oracles are all about taking responsibility of enforcement actions. So like freezing tokens, confiscating tokens. So they're using a public key and their authority in the space, and they've allowed to interoperate with the smart contract as part of the protocol and the terms and conditions, that when you draft the contract, you can declare which oracles are permitted to interoperate with it. And so they'd be able to then confiscate and freeze tokens, and they'd be accountable to their actions because their actions are on chain, and they have to, act within the law and all that kind of stuff. So oracles are a big topic, but at their heart, just to reemphasize, they're just a trusted data feed. And the way that we've defined them and used them are in very specific, narrow cases, but there's also a lot more that can be done there. I'm not sure, that's not really a question. Zach, hey Zach. Will that mobile app allow us, the users, to engage in contract activities without requiring us to have registered with a separate identity oracle? That depends on the situation, right? So a contract can have many identity oracles. So you can, as a user, basically choose which identity oracles you want to do the KYC process with. You can do more than one, you can do just one, but all you need is one, essentially, if that makes sense. So there's identity oracles, the way they operate is unique. It's not a multi-sig arrangement. They issue certificates, they get attached with a transaction, and the smart contract validates that certificate as well as the rest of the details of the transaction. So if one identity oracle goes offline, you can just go to another one, and you can still always trade your assets. You're never constrained. Sorry, the message there. Go to the next one here. So can EMI, so EMI stands for Electronic Money Institution, collect fees, I think that's what he means here, collect fees for currency token transactions in the same currency tokens, or it has to be BSV? Do the issued currency tokens have to be integer numbers? Can the fees for currency token transactions be collected? Okay, start one by one. So yes, no, they can technically. We haven't built into the protocol yet, but we've explored it. There are ways to do that. So right now, no, it has to be BSV, like it's called an action fee. In the future, it's possible. Do the issued currency tokens have to be integer numbers? Our protocol is based on that, but we also have a precision value that can give clarity about where the precision is for like cents for dollars. So the dollars themselves will be an integer value, but you can define where you want the precision to be. Can the fees for currency token transactions be collected to automatically changeable addresses? Yes. Yes, it can. To which extent are tokenized currency tokens programmable? So tokenized currency tokens are programmable in the exact same manner that Bitcoin is and more. So the protocol itself adds more functionality to the programmability of it. But most importantly, from a user's perspective, just a token holder's perspective, the full use of script, the full power of script is available to them for all other tokens. So there's one caveat to that though. Optionally, the smart contract issuer can customize what scripts the contract allows for. So we actually think it's a really, really important component of currency tokens, for example. We think that central banks are going to want to take this in very conservative steps. And the way to do that is to restrict the type of smart contracts that can be used, or type of locking scripts that can be used, to well-defined and proven use cases or script templates. And then over time, as trust builds up and that library expands, essentially the standards expand, they can add to it. But from a protocol point of view, there's no restrictions. So it's fully expressive in that sense, or extensible. Could they be the base for other smart contracts with fees expressed in currency tokens? I think you could do it. I'd have to think a bit more about it. I can't answer in good faith right now. Plans to integrate with other BSV systems, run, STOS, ELAS. So we don't have any immediate plans, right? So those protocols can't accomplish anything for us, is the way I look at it. I think they're great systems. They got some great protocols. I think there might be some niche use cases that they just excel. They're going to be better than the tokenized protocol. And there's some great people running them. So if our customers long-term demand certain use cases that are on this protocol, 100%. We're not going to here dictate how things should be done. However, we're really trying to build use cases and functionality for our customers that's useful and valuable. And I don't see at the moment anything that can be done with those that can't be done with the tokenized protocol and can't be done better either. So I see the tokenized protocol as more efficient, more cost effective, more flexible, more suited to real business in nearly every way. I just see it as better for the customers. Like that's what I would use if I was going to do a tokenized protocol. I think like the obvious concern people have, or they'd always look at my response there and go, well, obviously you'd say that because it's your tokenized protocol. Fair. I'm not going to be able to convince you otherwise. But at the same time, I'm fairly like when the layer 1 token came out, for example, a script, we took internally, we just took a hard look at it and said, like, is there anything about this that should cause us to change direction and incorporate it? Or is there any parts of the tokenized protocol that we should abandon in favor of it? We are most interested in building a successful company. We're most interested in building something that's useful, that actually has an impact on the world. We're less interested about whose name is below the standard. Like I couldn't care less, to be honest. It's obviously like our baby for sure, because we worked on it a long time. But a lot of the approaches that these protocols have taken, like those were on the drawing board before I went to the tokenized protocol. Like those are all those examples I looked at and I was like, man, that has major flaws. That has major flaws. That can't work. That restricts that opportunity. So like the way they've done it, barring the layer 1 and layer, not the layer 0, the layer 1 was novel for us. The push transaction, I wasn't aware of that it could be done until I was made aware of it. So I was quite late in the stage. That's the one that was a surprise to me, and we did evaluate it with an honest heart and an open and honest heart. But all the other ones, those are like on the drawing board, except for when I was doing all kinds of designs to kind of figure out where the protocols would be. I looked at those and I didn't think they were viable for the protocol, so to speak. So, but again, they're doing great work. I like the designs. There's no reason why you can't build a great token system with a lot of them, and there's gonna be some great use cases, I think, that come out of them. Okay, that's feedback. Does anyone? Which mobile wallets plan to integrate with tokenized tokens? We'll see. So we've got some conversations and meetings coming up. We've been largely in stealth mode for a number of reasons until now. The CoinGeek conference was largely about us unveiling our product and what we've been, protecting our little baby for all this time. And now that has marked a big change in our mindset. We want to engage with the world now. We want to start sharing everything we're doing. We're not looking to hide anymore. And we want to cooperate and collaborate with anyone in the industry that's interested in helping us build this tokenized future. It's going to take a lot of people to do. You can't do it on your own. Eventually, everyone's going to be using it. So that's the future. And to get there, you got to get some people started and helping. So we always respond within, I would say, 12 hours, 24 hours in our social media channels. So if anyone has any questions about what we're doing, about the protocol, bugs they find, business questions, like reach out, we will respond. We're available. We want to help. We dedicate a lot of our time for free to helping people understand the protocol and to working out bugs and getting things up. We want to continue to do that. So please don't be afraid to shout out and connect with us. Take a couple more here. How can the issuer protect the secure zone from which the tokens are managed? So, this is, there's lots of techniques, but essentially you can do a couple things. If you got a server, you can do AWS, you can manage that in all the traditional ways. But there's also an interesting thing you can do. You can actually spread a smart contract agent across a number of machines and across a number of services and use multi-sig arrangements or even threshold signature arrangements such that you need an N of M signing arrangement. So let's say you have 5 smart contract agents that all operate effectively one contract, and they each have a shard of a particular private key or thereabouts, or a multi-sig. They have one of the signatures or keys. Well, then you might need 3 of 5 to sign off on any particular one. So if one machine gets compromised, the rest will still, you've got redundancy there. So that's a really important thing that you can do. And again, everything is on chain, right? So the record of who signed for what and what machines were compromised, you can go back in time and know exactly when they're compromised and what you can trust and what you can't. So it's still like a profound step change in how security is managed with respect to the most important records. Does Tokenized hold any patents? We do not. None yet. We got a couple ideas and we looked at it, but we haven't actually executed on any of them yet. Is there a plan to integrate to ERP systems and accounting systems? Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the stuff we want to be able to port over to Xero's, QuickBooks, SAP systems, and absolutely, yeah. So I've actually spent a lot of time really studying ERP systems, studying accounting, speaking with some world experts that have developed accounting philosophies and systems, and even consulted to the top 100 banks and presented them with our system, showed how we're doing it, got their expertise when it came to financial reporting and how it's going to integrate with bank reporting systems and things like that today. So we've got a very good sense of where we're going there, and we're laying a foundation that's going to be optimal for when we get to those integration kind of points, I guess. Is the biometric validation using Vault? It's not. I'm not sure. I actually don't know the answer to that question. You'd have to ask our developer. All right, there was one that I was going to come back to you. So how to create the smart contract and tokenize on BSV. Okay. Let me just share my screen. Oh, is anyone else got any questions or things they'd like me to explain before I dive into this one? This might be a big one. what I was thinking to kind of tackle this and kind of wrap up some other things that might be interesting, because there's no other questions right at the moment, is just dive into the docs quickly and kind of give you guys a tour of those docs and explain some of the important pieces, how it functions, kind of give my take on why I did certain things. So can I get a couple thumbs up if that sounds of interest to people? Everyone's probably logged off. Okay, I got 2, 3. Okay, we'll go. Just give me 2 seconds. All right, can you please let me know if that's clear and legible? It's too small. Is that better? Is that the right size, guys? More? Okay, I'll just carry on. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is our docs. So tokenized.com. Chat, just follow along if you like. So preface, this is really the introduction about what it is. So we are, like I've said before, and I said publicly a number of times, we're really focusing on commercial records. So tokens being a component of that, oracles being a component of that, smart contracts being a component of that. Our ambitions are big, but we're starting small and we're doing it in chunks, right? So this is a broad visionary statement that brings together a lot of commercial standards together that we think that we can consolidate and make better, because software can on-chain component is important, but also the ability to interact with the smart contracts themselves. There's some really profound opportunities that I don't think I've even really talked in public before, or talked to many people, even in a company, about what you can do. But there's a lot that can be done once you lay the foundation down correctly and you think about what can be done. So I've gone a very broad, sweeping vision for what this is, and it's really about replacing all financial messaging standards, all fiat systems, all clearing networks, all payment networks, everything, right? So everything can be done in that manner or that style on the Bitcoin network, and it can be done better, cheaper, faster, and even simpler when you consider the customer experience, not the technical developer's experience, but the customer experience. And then into the EDI standards, we think a lot of those can be improved. And we've been working with, lightly been working with Uniswap, for example, on some like early kind of development ideas and things like that. And they're doing great work there. But we hope to continue that relationship and develop those as time goes on. And again, have them interact with some of the features of smart contracts when it comes to like the securitization of some commercial records there, but also the interesting financial products that come out of that. Thanks, Ben. Have a great night or a great day. So the protocol uses smart contract tokens. I went over that, but we'll skip that part there. So the key components is the wallet itself, that what I just showed you, but also the smart contract agent. So that's the autonomous agent service that is issued essentially or controlled by the issuer. And they're the ones that effectively administer the contract on behalf of the issuer in accordance with the terms and conditions. Specification. Okay, so this is all getting a bit into the weeds. I'm going to skip and just kind of go to the operations. So how does it work? So it's all about the request and the response. So we've got a bunch of different contract operations here. And here's the visual for it. So request action, response action. So you've got your contract operations, your asset operations, your transfer operations, your governance operations, and your enforcement operations. This is the smart contract responses that are available to those different ones. And the protocol specifies a certain sequence rules by which these are broadcasted and whether they'll be valid or rejected. So it's really about building up the state of a contract, right? So to have a contract, you need to define the very basics, the foundational piece of a contract, which is the contract offer. So that's who the issuer is, what the basic terms and conditions are, the governing law, all those components before.
You publish that to the blockchain, and then you get the response, which is the contract formation, which is essentially saying the contract agent agrees that that contract offer is valid in accordance with the protocol, the tokenized protocol, and as well as it's a sensical, all filled in kind of contract. And from then on, the smart contract is essentially set. It has certain terms and conditions that it has state that will now respond to all future requests with respect to. So with your asset operations, you get your asset definition and your modifications. These are all about managing the fields associated with the assets themselves. And of course, this response goes to creating an asset or to changing an asset. The rejections along the side are basically on-chain messages that say, this is not a valid request for whatever reason with an error message. So again, it's all on-chain, fully accountable. Transfer operations, you got transfer, settlement. This is all about moving tokens between addresses. So the settlement is the contract again saying this is a valid transfer. It respects all the rules and conditions. It's within the terms and conditions. It gets transferred. And then you have the governance operations, which are all about proposals leading to a vote, leading to ballots cast, leading to proposals and results. So the whole thing makes sense. I still got a lot of people, and I think I'll keep going. So enforcement operations, so order, freeze, thaw, confiscation, reconciliation. So these are the ones that allow for an issuer or an authority oracle on behalf of the issuer or on behalf of the government to do the things that you think they need to do for property rights. So just taking tokens, freezing them, what have you. So again, fully accountable. One of the core philosophies for why we're doing what we're doing is really thinking about, why do you have anything on chain, right? And why would you have any commercial record, contract, payment, anything? Why would you have it on chain? Well, there's obvious reasons for it, right? There's a timestamping component. There's a signature component. There's a data integrity component. There's a robustness and reliability component. It can't be corrupted. There's no political risk. There's no organizational risk. So there's just a really, really great record to store some of the most contentious and valuable data that's out there, the commercial records data. And when you consider that, then you think, well, what should go on chain and what shouldn't go on chain? And our protocol spent a lot of time thinking that through. And we think that nearly every commercial action and event should go on chain when it has to do with the ownership rights, when it has to do of really important critical things like the financial backbone, the contractual elements. So that's not a great explanation, but it's that's essentially the way we look at it. So what it does is it holds everyone to a higher standard of account. So when you get directors making certain actions that affect the shareholders, why not have their actions, their decisions be accountable to the shareholders in an immutable manner? Why not have the same for shareholders? Why not have the same for officers? Why not have the same for anyone making a payment with a merchant? Everyone is held to a higher standard of account such that there's no real way to play any funny business with the data itself. If that makes sense. So that basic request response model is really, really important to understand how the protocol operates. That's the heart of the protocol. Then you get the rules. So part of the inspiration for this, I mean, it's important to have these rules, but with Bitcoin, we think that Bitcoin, the white paper wasn't enough, as I think we've all seen over the last 10 plus years, that the protocol that Craig had in mind, the economic rules, the protocol rules, there was a lot more to how the miners should behave and the rules that they should enforce and how they should enforce them. And that was the inspiration for me kind of trying to codify some of these rules that I see as important for keeping this protocol running really well. So it's not necessarily like I mean, for this example, all contract actions must be cash flow neutral. Not a game changer. It doesn't have to be the case, but not having that leads to all kinds of issues that make it difficult to deal with, right? There's other administrative tasks that have to happen. So when you put a protocol rule in there and you roll it out system-wide, then it just improves the system as a whole. It makes things more efficient. It lowers the cognitive overhead. It's a better user experience for the participants of that, the infrastructural participants. So yeah, there's all these rules, and it goes through the general overall protocol rules. It goes through the contract operations, the asset operations, transfer operations. All of them have rules. All of them a sequence of events, things that need to happen before others, things that just cannot happen. So they're important to understand, but you don't really need to understand them because our repo and the code that we have in smart contract action, maybe not every single one quite yet, but pretty much follows this type of stuff anyways. It's important for it just to operate. And it really, again, when you think about it, when you take a step back and think about it in contractual terms, in terms of
how the contracting parties, how they're affected, it's usually like a no-brainer. It's pretty obvious. You're building up a state of a contract. You're doing things that are fairly intuitive. Tokens. So token types. So really, this is just the core details about what an asset ID is, like the data structures around it, the identification of it, the different types that are there, fungibility, modifying tokens, balances. So it's nothing too exciting there. Asset management. Okay, this stuff's a bit interesting. I'll tell you what, I'll take you through a quick example down here. So this is, so what this is basically a scenario, frequent flyer points, where it shows sort of the message structures of the tokenized protocol, the request response and the fields and what some sample data might be. So in this case here, we got, what's the story here? Okay, so you got like a few companies that have got like frequent flyer points and a holiday package. Basically, so Bob is going to get some frequent flyer points as part of the contract. He's going to send them to Diane. So in this case, you get Bob. He wants to transfer to Diane, and it's one represents his input. So you can have different inputs for Bob, different addresses, like change addresses, for example. So he'll have a bunch of tokens. He'll send them. He provides his own change address. He addresses the contract in question. So this is the smart contract address. He provides contract fees and a response cost to this output, so that when I say cash flow neutral, it means that the smart contract agent can use these fees not only to fund its operation with the contract fees, but also to pay for the responding action. So minor fees, of course, and all the outputs. So Bob's got change and he's got transfer action. And this transfer action is really the heart of the payload. However, the inputs and outputs and their position are important to the protocol as well. So we use the inputs and outputs to transfer Bitcoin or tokens just as much as we do Bitcoin, but the actual metadata in here explains what's happening. So transfer action payload. So your asset ID that defines the loyalty point in question that the tokenaire has. You've got the senders, you got Bob, he's got these many points. You got the receivers, that's how many points he's sending to her. And then you got Bob, that's his change. So that's that minus that equals that. So it's just like Bitcoin and the UTXO model, the inputs and outputs and how it all works out. Then you go down here, you've got the response transaction, which is from the agent after the smart contract agent after it's validated it. So you have the input from them. So it's sending from its contract address. The outputs are to Bob, Diane, Bob, the two inputs that he has. And the value is dust. That will eventually go to 0 with the upcoming changes that shatters is indicated. The settlement action here shows the settlement values. So this is now the resulting value of the tokens against each of those addresses. So Bob's original, he sent all of them just like you would in Bitcoin. So this is now 0 and all his change has gone to this new address, the 3, and then Diane's got those ones. So it's not actually part of the protocol to have to send all of them, but it's best practice. And you can continue to use that address just like in Bitcoin, you could top it up again. But it's based on the UTXO model. The UTXOs are rails for it, but a token is not tied to a particular UTXO. It's tied to a particular locking script. So that's important. So in that case, just to expand upon that a little further, if you had let's say you had a UTXO with some dust in the current incarnation, and you have these points here, and you accidentally spent the UTXO or the Satoshis that these tokens were sitting on, and you didn't move these tokens because you didn't use a tokenized protocol action, well, you could then top up that address with the exact same locking script and some Satoshis and then move it later. So it doesn't move tokens, doesn't affect the tokens. There's no risk there. This is an example, expanded upon version. So that was a very simple example. Down here we go where you've got multi-contracts involved. So there's atomic swaps going on here and multi-assets. So you can take this to any degree. You can have many, many contracts involved, many, many asset types involved, and it's all done on an atomic basis. So in this case, you got tokenaire, 0 input, 1 to 10 is tokenaire's other inputs to kind of like, as you preserve privacy, you'd obviously have, as you preserve privacy, you'd obviously have like your tokens distributed across addresses, just like you have Bitcoin, right? And the same applies to here. All of that is accounted for and allowed for in the protocol. So you address the 2 contracts first and the first 2 inputs. It's a requirement of the protocol. Then you've got the addresses that you want to send to the change. And then you've got the inter-contract messaging cost, because contracts communicate on chain when it comes to like gathering signatures. And then you got the transfer action. So transfer action payload, you've got asset ID, the senders, receivers, just like before, but now you can see there's many assets, asset ID. So these are coupons. So in this case, what's happening here is they've got like a holiday package, a travel package, where the buyer is going to get business class tickets, frequent flyer points, oversized baggage coupons, lounge entry coupons, hotel coupons, hotel breakfast buffet, gourmet dinner, luxury spa package, 18-hole golf electric buggy, kids club. So all of these tokens are all part of the one transaction. So they're redeeming their frequent flyer points, these 2 million that they have, and they're redeeming it for this huge package that is tokenized. They got all these different things that they can go and they can redeem when they get there, including the flights. So this is kind of like an example of where you can take it. This is obviously utility token stuff, but they can apply just as easily to financial instruments where you've got perhaps fairly complicated deals with assets and options and derivatives going in different directions and payouts to settle it. But again, it can be done in a manner where you collect all the signatures, executed completely or not executed at all. So and the mind boggles when you think about like the potentials when you get into some really complex financial transactions, but all possible. This kind of gives you just a look at the actual on-chain messaging where you're basically collecting signatures, you're sending around for approval to the different smart contracts. So it just describes the payloads here and who's what and what goes on the side of it. So I'm not going to bore you guys with this. It's a bit heavy. I'm going to put it back to the community here and see if you guys want me to keep talking. I'm happy to keep going. I'm enjoying a lot of this, to be honest. I love talking about Tokenized, and happy to explain anything that anyone has, any specific questions or they'd like me to drill back down on. Please feel free to chime in the chat. Got someone typing. So forgive my ignorance, but where do I make a token? You'd have to use an app like ours, or you can use some dev tools like a terminal or something like that. And we have a base to show that, but essentially you just got to create the message, sign the message, and send it on chain. And you got to spin up a smart contract agent. So we have a pretty comprehensive guide, and our docs and our repo our GitHub is very, very comprehensive in their documentation. So you can work it out if you're skilled. But of course, if you need some help, we can point you in the right direction and get you started. What are your plans to support customers interested to go STO? So absolutely, that's one of the main goals. We want to do security token offerings, all kinds of them. We need to get the foundational pieces right, and we need to essentially get the licenses that we need or partners that we need. So we're in active discussions with various partners and things like that, but it's still early days, and we're looking more to kind of get our core technology and foundational pieces ironed out and robust enough to be able to support financial infrastructure. So taking on utility tokens that are lower in risk, ironing out those wrinkles, and then we're going to start to partner with some key players that allow us to do that. So it's an ongoing discussion. A lot of people are interested. A lot of conversations lead to, this is fantastic. This is great. We'd love to pilot a project. We'd love to issue our shares on it. We'd love to do a private debt or issue a bond of some sort or tokenize some asset. But largely the conversation stops when we have to get all the tools ready and get it polished up and ready to go so we can actually do it. Thanks, mate. So Stein, yeah, I got one more typing. So either, it doesn't matter. There's no. So Stein's question: are transactions signed with a single key pair or a hierarchical deterministic system? So we use hierarchical deterministic for our wallet. It doesn't matter though. The protocol has no opinion on that matter. It sits outside of our protocol, so to speak. All it cares about is ECDSA, public key, private key, all that basic pieces. All right. Well, it is late here, so if there's no questions, no one's hopping up and down to ask something, then I might just call that. It's been, got a few questions coming in now. Oh no, just thanks. Really appreciate everyone's time. I hope that was useful and informative. Like I say, reach out to us. There will be recording. But yeah, please reach out to us in our community channels. They're everywhere. Please feel free to join the wait list for our beta, as I posted at the top of the wait room there, that button, and just get in touch with us. And we look forward to sharing our app with you guys, having you guys play with it, getting feedback, building something great. But appreciate your time, guys. Thank you very much.